Let's just start off with a very simple question. What are music NFTs? Can you kind of explain this to me? And what is the technology that we are talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. So NFTs are really just certificates of authenticity that point to any type of media file. And so music NFTs historically have been mostly collectible certificates of authenticity that point to digital audio. Now, what we're exploring at my company, Royal, is certificates of authenticity that point to ownership in rights in a song, not just the audio file itself. So you know NFTs can really represent ownership in lots of different things. For music, it's either audio or rights.
When did you start getting interested in NFTs and blockchain technology? Can you kind of give me some background and what piqued your interest in this and how you kind of envisioned music being part of the NFT world?
Absolutely. So it kind of all started 7 years ago. I met the Winklevoss twins while I was in Mexico on spring break. It's quite the cliche, stereotypical story. But that's when I discovered Bitcoin. Fast forward to kind of the rise of Ethereum in 2016, 2017. And I started getting excited about decentralized applications and how that might disintermediate the music business. And so I started some experiments back then that were NFT related, more specifically claiming proof of attendance tokens when you're at a music festival. And that was kind of the technology I was experimenting with in 17 and 18. But then in the middle of 2020, I started seeing NFTs manifest as certificates of authenticity for art. But it was mostly the visual art layer of any type of media. And that made a lot of sense because there's quite, perfect skeuomorphism from like physical collecting art, whether it's prints or one of one paintings, to digital collecting of art. The skeuomorphism is kind of clear between those two worlds, where the physical world and the digital world have similar human behavior. For music, however, the way that people stereotypically collect music is with vinyls and CDs, right? It's just a different manifestation of collection. So when I started minting some of the first music NFTs ever, they actually always had a visual component associated with them. It was audio visual art. It was something that was kind of immediately tangible when you looked at it and you could say, oh, wow, that's beautiful or that's interesting. Music alone, you know, when you start thinking about tokenizing it, runs into a lot of specific issues surrounding IP. And because I was one of the first artists to do this and experiment with this, I kind of went head on with a lot of the kind of challenges that exist because there's kind of no precedent for NFTs and IP distinction in the past. It's never really existed. It's not in any of the legal agreements that assign copyright. And so for my journey since the middle of 2020 when I started minting music NFTs, I've spent a lot of time exploring the IP specific ownership layer of how NFTs might apply to music.
Yeah, we'll definitely delve a little bit more into the IP and how all of that works a little bit later on. But can you talk to me a little bit about Royal? What is Royal, and what are limited digital assets, and how does that also play into the world of music NFTs?
Absolutely. So Royal is a company that I founded with my best friend from college, JD. The goal of Royal was kind of to create a project on the tail end of some of the collectible music, the audiovisual things that I just mentioned. Creating a company that could actually assign rights to an owner of an NFT. So Royal is a platform where you can invest in your favorite artists by owning rights in your favorite songs. And so far, we've actually done four artists. We've done Nas, Verite, Ali, and recently Diplo. All of the issuances and sales of those tokens have sold out in a matter of minutes. And we've actually had over $1 million of ownership interest from fans, which has never been possible really in the past, where fans can actually own a piece of all of these songs for the first time in a frictionless, seamless way. And we're really, really proud of just recently hitting that $1 million number.
Congrats, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about what limited digital assets are at Royal and how
Absolutely.
that also plays into music NFTs?
Yeah, so kind of as I mentioned before, and I'll just rebrief really quickly, music NFTs historically have been mostly just certificates of authenticity on the blockchain that point to an audio file. And what we do at Royal is we have an interesting take on NFTs. We call them limited digital assets for a couple of reasons. One, most people, when they hear the word NFT or non fungible token, it's kind of difficult to register what it means. And our goal at Royal is to kind of onboard the regular music fan to the crypto ecosystem by abstracting all of the confusing stuff. So limited digital asset is just a way that we at least at Royal think makes a little bit more sense of what an NFT actually is. And what we do at Royal that's quite different from everyone else is limited digital assets are by nature technically NFTs, but they have a bunch more features than a stereotypical NFT as most people know them today. Some of those features include, true ownership in the music, specifically streaming royalty rights. So fans can actually earn royalties when the song is streamed across platforms, whether that's Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, etc., where now artists and fans are actually partners in the ownership of a song. And both are incentivized to make that song grow. So our thesis is when a fan actually owns a piece of a song, how much more likely are they to add it to a playlist, to share it with their friends, to stream it on repeat, to tell their parents and everyone about it, really. We think ownership is an extremely important incentive mechanism for fans. But the other benefits of LDAs that are kind of unlike other types of NFTs are redemption mechanics and benefits, where if you're a holder of one of these assets, you can get direct communication with your favorite artist. You can even redeem an all access pass once a year to go backstage at your favorite artist show. But it's ultimately up to the artist to decide what benefits they can ascribe to these limited digital assets. And we're building the tooling to enable artists to kind of customize these assets however they'd like.
Can you also explain how a song would be fractionalized? If an artist lists their song or a collection of songs on Royal, how does that work and what are the mechanics behind that?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So we like to say that Royal enables anyone to invest in music and buy music as art. And in purchasing music as a piece of art, we assign those users rights in the song. Almost as though, when anybody makes a record, I might have a collaborator who's the singer, and I assign that singer a certain piece of the rights of that song because they help me make the song, right? So we kind of treat fans as collaborators in the record. That's like the technical kind of way that the legal agreements are structured. And you can actually, for anyone who's interested in checking out our legal architecture, we publish the legal agreements on royal.io on every single edition of every token that we mint. So you can actually see what rights you own when you're a fan. And then technically, of course, once you're a rights holder, there are administrators that collect royalties on behalf of artists. And then those payments are made to token holders on either a quarterly basis or a biannual basis, depending on the structures that the artist has. And that's kind of the very brief technical version of how it works.
Yeah, so if I'm an artist and I want to make one of these assets, how do I go about doing that on Royal?
Great question. So today, Royal's relatively closed ecosystem. It's completely curated where we're picking specific artists to partner with to kind of demonstrate the potential of the technology and show that there's a real audience for it. And we've been lucky to have, over 250,000 monthly active users, let alone millions of other users that have signed up for the platform. So we really do believe that music ownership is interesting to the masses, not necessarily just NFTs. At Royal, we like to say we're a platform that enables anyone to own music. NFTs just happen to be the layer of technology that we use to make that possible. A big reason for that is making payments to thousands of people on chain is actually quite a bit easier than doing it in the fiat kind of traditional banking world. So it's quite a bit more efficient and cost effective. It also enables us to kind of create these exclusive benefits surrounding ownership. But unfortunately today, we are a closed curated platform with the perfect long-term, the utopian long-term goal of being completely open to any artist that has ownership in music and wants to utilize our tools. So right now closed, in the future, we hope every artist can use it.
Hmm. And you mentioned how fans can basically take or have some sort of ownership when they buy these music NFTs on Royal. So, can you explain a little bit about those perks and what happens when you buy those assets? And what is the incentive for people to come in and buy shares of a song that they really like?
Absolutely. So we believe that like music ownership has two instrumental components. You have the intrinsic value of the song because there are real cash flows that exist, from streaming services. But even as consumption of music moves into the Web3 world, those streaming rights would still apply to platforms like Audius that are Web3 native streaming services. So you have the intrinsic layer of ownership and the actual cash flows associated with that ownership. But then you also have, as you mentioned, the benefits layer. And we have some really, really amazing previous examples of utilizations of these benefits. So for instance, I did this auction of my album about a year ago that set some records in the NFT space, and the top 6 bidders actually got all access passes to my shows for life, 2 of which ended up coming backstage with me at EDC Las Vegas, and getting that backstage experience to those 2 specific owners was, to them at least, and their feedback to me was, it was one of the most incredible experiences of their life. And so you can kind of ad hoc add all these different benefits, whether it's actually live integrations or even digital integrations. If I have a bunch of music that nobody's heard before, I can gate access to that music to only those people who hold the token. And of course, people ask, well, what happens if it leaks and it loses its exclusivity? We can actually track who leaked it based on the token that ungated the content. So we're building a lot of this technology now. Some of it hasn't launched yet, but the benefits layer of ownership is really interesting as well. So you've kind of got the intrinsic value of the cash flows associated with ownership and the emotional value of being a part of an exclusive club of owners of a song with an artist. And what we think is particularly interesting about Royal and our LDA architecture is there's inherent scarcity in our product. There's only 100% of a song that you could ever sell. Whereas with collectibles, you can theoretically mint them ad nauseum into infinity, right? You can create digital merch over and over again. Whereas with true ownership, there's only a certain amount that could ever exist from a percentage basis. And we're really excited to kind of, to create rules surrounding that scarcity for our assets.
And can you explain how fans can receive payment if the song gets popular? How does that work?
Yeah, it's actually quite simple. So the artist is ultimately responsible for, right now Royal, handholds people through the process because it's a little bit complicated. In the future, we hope there's a really simple portal where a business manager from an artist or whoever is administrating the royalties just clicks a couple buttons, and then the money is actually sent to a smart contract that money is claimable only by all of those people who own the token. So you kind of have this bucket of money that goes into a contract, and that contract has a list of all the wallet addresses of people who own the token. Now, at Royal, we want to abstract all the complexity of that. So if you've never had a wallet before, you don't need one. You can actually just log in with an email password and pay with a credit card, and we kind of handle all the back end for you. We actually generate a wallet on your behalf that can interact with these, we call them treasury contracts that collect the money. And that's the infrastructure that we've built today. We actually made our first royalty payment in January for one of my songs that we gave 50% ownership away in. And it was really, really cool to see, to watch the experience of those owners getting, it was really the first time an on-chain royalty payment has happened at scale. And it was a really exciting moment.
I think you already kind of touched on this, but can you talk about what rights I have as a consumer when I buy these assets on Royal?
In the long term, we want artists to be able to customize whatever rights they want to sell. There's so many components of a copyright. You have the composition layer, you have the recording layer, and then each of those layers has different revenue streams. As an artist, you can customize, which layer you want to sell. And as a consumer, a big part of our mission at Royal is kind of educating, the masses on like where the money actually comes from in music. And so today we focus specific on streaming royalty rights. So that includes, as I mentioned previously, Spotify, Apple Music, in some cases, YouTube as well. And on the master side of a recording, there are really 4 types of income. There's digital downloads on iTunes and like purchases, which is a small component, streaming, which is the highest revenue generating component, synchronizations, which is a bit different, like when other people use your music in a commercial or in an advertisement. And then you also kind of have digital radio, Sound Exchange, and Sirius XM. The number one component of that income is streaming. And so we focus on that in the short term. That's also the type of income that fans influence the most, right? A fan isn't necessarily responsible for an advertising agency using, your song in a commercial or something. And that's typically a smaller portion of the total income. So the reason why we focused on streaming income first is it's actually, the number one generator and also what fans control the most. In the future, however, we really hope to extend that ownership to all types of ownership in music.
Now going back to the topic of copyright, how do NFTs and copyright intersect? And how much ownership do artists or labels retain over these tokenized works?
That's a wonderful question. So every artist has a different deal. Some artists are independent, some artists are signed. Some artists are signed and recouped, which means a label sends an advance of money when they sign a record deal. And if the music has generated more than that number from the advance, the artist still participates in sometimes 20 to 50% of the actual revenue on the master side of the recording. So we wanted to build Royal in such a flexible way where any artist could use it, whether you're signed or unsigned. You can sell whatever whatever ownership you maintain after whatever deals you've already signed. Now, we're lucky that the artists that we've worked with so far have been mostly independent, but we do have some artists in the future that have deal structures, and everyone is kind of flexible to make it work because everyone is so excited to explore the potential of what NFTs can unlock, what limited digital assets can unlock. And, your next specific question was regarding like how the kind of how the royalty splits actually work, or how the splits rather work for an artist, it's really up to the artist to decide how much they want to sell. It's not really our choice. We kind of think that under 10% isn't as interesting to fans, so we try to push artists to sell at least 20. And that's kind of where not all artists have that ability, but most do still maintain close to 20%. And so we wanted to create that flexibility for artists to actually use the platform. Um, the issue with tokenizing audio itself, like actually leveraging the audio file, is that you have to get clearances from all the participants on a record. And this is something that I kind of ran into when I did some of my first NFT experiments and learned a lot through legal research and through kind of lots of time and analysis. The best way to kind of think about music ownership is on the right side because it gives the artists max flexibility.
Can you explain how an asset owner can basically put that up for sale on an exchange like OpenSea? I think I saw on Royal's website that not only can fans buy shares at Royal, but they can also sell these to other people on exchanges like OpenSea. How would that work?
Absolutely. So we like to think of these things not as much as shares, but as like literally manifestations of art and ownership. And so each token is completely unique. It has album artwork that's generated uniquely. So all the tokens actually look completely different. And that token just represents your ownership in our particular case, the streaming rights of a song. Once you own it and you paid for it on Royal, you now have full flexibility to withdraw it to your own self-hosted wallet and to sell it on exchanges like OpenSea, or any other composable crypto ecosystem. And you can list that asset, and a lot of people miss out on the primary sale and are still really excited to get involved in the secondary sale. We've actually already done at Royal, between all of our assets, over $1 million of secondary sales across all of our different assets thus far. And I individually, previously had done up to $5 million of secondary sales. What's really interesting though is most people kind of take this assumption that secondary sales always go back to the original issuer. That's actually only enforced by marketplaces, not by the blockchain itself. So there are some cases where you could do a side deal with someone and just send them a token and get ETH in return without paying a royalty. It's kind of a giant misconception in the space. But most of the liquidity exists on exchanges like OpenSea that do enforce that secondary royalty. At Royal, we actually give the artist all of it. We only take a fee on the primary. We let the artist keep all of the secondary royalties from exchanges.
So you just released an album, Ultraviolet. So what was the process of selling that as an NFT? And did you expect that amount of interest in sales?
Not at all. It was about a year ago that we did that album, and it was the first music tokenized album, at least that I know of. I'm sure maybe some other people had tried it, but it was definitely from a mainstream standpoint one of the first. And we built a ranked auction on my own website. I had to kind of bring my own audience. It wasn't an external platform, and it was really just an experiment. We expected maybe $50,000 to $100,000 at the time, which was still incredible, right? Like music had not been valued in that way historically. So even that expectation we were really potentially excited about, and the auction just happened to explode and generate $11.7 million. And that kind of set in motion all of the excitement surrounding the idea of music and NFTs and music and Web3. I personally have been involved for quite a while. The first music Web3 company that was significant was Audius, as I'm sure you're familiar with, and some of our listeners are familiar with. I was actually Audius's first artist advisor from 4 or 5 years ago. So I've been quite in the weeds for a very long time. And I think that's why, when I started doing these experiments, a lot of the crypto community just got behind it in a big way because they believe in the mission. The mission at Royal is quite simple. It's giving the public access to an asset class that has only been previously accessible by record labels and private equity firms. But music is an asset class, and fans uniquely influence its success. So, the best example I like to give is 7 years ago, I had a song called Is It Love? It was the first song that I ever independently released. And I had a record deal on the table. It was $15,000 for 50% of the song. Today, that song has generated over $750,000, right? So if I had taken that deal, I would have been shooting myself in the foot. If my fans had taken that deal, or my fans might have been willing to pay $50,000 to $100,000 for that ownership at the time, they all would have been in a really interesting place today because the song's generated 750, right? And so it's kind of, a lot of people talk about royalties being insignificant, and sometimes that's true, But over the long term, if you pick a song that happens to really resonate, there are real cash flows associated with IP ownership. And I think the narrative has been a little bit misleading in that streams don't really pay artists. It's really that there are so many middlemen in between that are taking their cut. So artists are kind of left with very little. If you actually own all of it and share that ownership with your fans, which is the model that we believe in the future, we think that there's a lot of opportunity, incredible opportunity. And that's not even extending what could potentially happen in the Web3 world of streaming consumption.
Diplo also just dropped his new song, Don't Forget My Love, on Royal for March 29th. So, what was the response like for that?
It was absolutely incredible. Diplo has been a friend of mine for 12 years. He's an investor in the company. And I happened to run into him at the Super Bowl, just at a random party gathering, at a house gathering, a dinner. And I love that. I just love that song. I've known him for a while. I told him it was my favorite song, that he's released in years. And I was just like, I think we should maybe do this on Royal. And Wes was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. It was as simple as that. 3 weeks later, we kind of moved some things around our schedule because obviously Diplo is, an icon and a cultural, a true cultural innovator in music. And we really wanted to show that, owning something that's new, that just came out is really, really exciting. And of course, the 20% of that, the streaming rights in that song sold out in a matter of minutes. We had 400 unique new people that probably have never used crypto before make purchases, which is kind of the whole point of Royal. Is we want to make it really easy for someone who doesn't know this word NFT, doesn't know how to use a crypto wallet, can still get involved and really own a piece of media and content that they love. And so Diplo was really an incredible moment that just happened. We're so proud of the team for making it happen. And the response from the community has been incredible. The beauty of these tokens now that Diplo's minted is he can actually create whatever benefits he wants after the fact. Now that they exist on chain, you can prove who owns them. And Diplo is going to be doing an exclusive mix for only those people who own those tokens. So not only do they get ownership in the song, but they get unique exclusive access to Diplo that they can also trade. So someone might listen to the mix, own the token for a little bit and decide that maybe they can potentially sell it for a profit on a platform like OpenSea. And then Diplo actually gets to participate in, and I don't know if this is the exact number, but I believe it's 7.5% of the sale after the fact, right? So all of these different new economic mechanics are so incredibly exciting for artists who've never been able to unlock this in the past. And really, Diplo is just the reason why we were excited about Diplo and Nas is these are cultural leaders that set a precedent for the next generation of artists. So we really hope Royal will ultimately cater to all the new artists that want to monetize their music and get their fans more involved.
I just really love how this NFT boom has really been very focused on creating that community, for fans, for people who are very excited about this. Can you talk a little bit about how Royal's maybe business model helps foster that community for music fans?
These questions are perfectly sequenced. That's kind of the best kind of final point and value add that Royal can create for an artist is community, but even more so data. In many ways, data drives community in that I'm lucky to have had over 1.2 billion streams on my music across platforms. I'm lucky to have had over 500,000 people come and see me perform, if not more than that, including festivals. I, as an artist, have no data on who any of those people are. It's almost impossible for me to build a community without social media, without the dependencies of an Instagram or a TikTok or a Twitter, where they gate, content to my followers. With crypto, I know everyone who owns one of these assets and can do anything I want directly with those wallets. And not all of those people even necessarily have to give me their identity in every case. If we pay them, we have to collect information. But you can own an asset, not claim a payment, and just interact with an artist anonymously, get access to that exclusive content anonymously, or enjoy a free ticket to a show once a year, right? So we're kind of building this ecosystem where artists get way more data on who their biggest fans are, and we think that's incredibly important, especially for smaller and mid-sized artists like myself. I've never been the biggest DJ in the world, but I have a very, very, very loyal following. So being able to unlock that 1,000 true fan theory is a big kind of mission that we have at the company.
And why did you pick the Polygon network for minting these NFTs? Are there specific benefits over that, over Ethereum or Solana blockchain networks?
Yes. So those are all the ones that that I am close with founders and engineers and pay attention to pretty regularly. I am an investor in Solana. I also own a lot of Polymatic tokens and of course I've early adopter to ETH, all of which are in my opinion the best options. The reason why we chose Polygon short term is because it's actually the cheapest for redemption and payouts. So if a fan makes $20 a month from a song, but on mainnet Ethereum it costs them $15 to claim it, it gets a little bit problematic, right? And these micropayments, people say, music doesn't generate money. If you're, let's say you're in the Philippines and you're playing, play to earn games, and I'm sure you've spoken to a lot of founders about play to earn and how powerful it is. Let's say you obtain ownership in one of these songs for free, because some artists are going to be doing that on Royal. I did it initially, and we've got other artists that are huge that aren't really doing it for the money. They're doing it for the community building aspect. Imagine you're in the Philippines and you can make $20 a month from ownership in a record. That's incredibly powerful. But if it costs you $15 to get it, it becomes a problem. So that was the primary reason why we started on Polygon. But Polygon is also, of course, compatible with mainnet ETH. So you can bridge assets between mainnet and Polygon should you choose. The other reason why we chose Polygon, it's primarily for cost. It's way lower cost than mainnet. And when you're doing lots of microtransactions at scale, we have to be really sensitive to cost. Solana is another fantastic option, and it's something that we're actively exploring. And mainnet ETH might eventually become a viable option when, ETH2 and POS launches. And a lot of these are questions for the future. The beauty of Royal is these assets can, we definitely believe in a multi-chain future. We believe that lots of blockchains are going to do lots of different things for lots of different implementations and people. And we just want to maintain that flexibility. So, the beauty of Polygon is you can, in the event we decide to switch for whatever reason, you can burn an asset in one place and mint it in another. That stuff is a little bit complicated technically, but it's possible. And Polygon just happened to fit the mold of what we wanted in the short term. And it's easy to facilitate payments, and it's easy to let fans pay with a credit card. And we think that that's so important to bring the masses to this technology.
How do you think that music NFTs will change the business model of the current music industry? And will it change how streaming rights and record labels, how those models work?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people ask at Royal, how do we feel about streaming services or record labels? I actually think both are extremely valuable into the future. Record labels do provide a lot of services to artists, especially artists that don't necessarily produce their own music. And they link a singer with a producer. They do all this A&R work. What Royal will do is ultimately it will force every party in the business to become more competitive for the artist, because the artist has an alternative. Now, we aim to really work with everybody. We definitely don't feel that Royal is competitive. We feel that we just unlock new value that has been previously restrictive. That value is fans actually owning the music. And we think that's incredibly powerful, not just from an intrinsic value standpoint, from cash flows, but from an emotional value standpoint, right? When you're walking down the street and you hear a song that you own an LDA of, that's a powerful moment where you can turn to your friend and be like, I actually owned this song when it first came out. That could totally happen, and probably will happen with Diplo's "Don't Forget My Love." If this becomes it's obviously it just came out 3 weeks ago. It has a lot of momentum. If this becomes a massive hit, all these people that participated get to say they were there first, and that's a really, really, really powerful message. So I think that the emotional value of music is really captured by this composable token ecosystem that previously hasn't existed. We don't really know what that looks like. To get really specific in answering your question, the prices that we use to price these assets are very much based on the cash flows of what these songs generate in the real world. And then where they trade in secondary represents the emotional premium of ownership that fans are excited about, right? So
Yeah.
if these assets trade up in secondary, it's proof that there's a lot of emotional value to fans. Not all assets will. It depends on the artist, right? It depends on the artist if they're growing, if they're losing popularity. And the beauty of Royal is we want to support all of it.
And my next question was kind of talking about, what's the landscape in terms of competition? And you already kind of touched on this. And I know that Spotify is also now trying to plan to add NFTs with their new streaming services, which was something new. Instagram is, trying to make their own NFTs. How does Royal kind of fit into all of that?
We actually work directly with Spotify on some things. I'm speaking to a bunch of Spotify PMs in a speaker series in a couple of weeks. We view any of these streaming services as potential collaborators for integrations. I know a lot of people, at least to my knowledge, when people talk about music NFTs, they very much talk about like the digital merch collectible layer. Not many
Mhm.
people are focused on the actual ownership layer, and that's primarily because it's the most challenging, and that's why we have a stellar legal team and amazing engineers. But I've had conversations with Apple Music, with Spotify, with Amazon Music, with Google. I think all of these platforms that offer music streaming services are excited to get involved. But at least in Spotify's case, I think they just published two job postings for like a Web3 director. But at least to our knowledge, there isn't going to be something happening soon in that department from my conversations with them. Though I'm not, an employee of Spotify, so I don't really know. But I know that they're eager to collaborate with us, and we actually use Spotify embed links on our front end when you go to our edition pages at royal.io.
Just wanted to ask, how active are you in using trading crypto? How often are you converting your digital currencies to cash, or are you just all kind of keeping it in the crypto area? We're just very
Yeah,
curious
on
to know.
a on a personal level, I don't like to disclose too much, but I am a long term Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana holder. I believe in all of those technologies pretty extensively, and I have since for Bitcoin at least 2014, for Ethereum 2016, and for Solana more recently, of course. I tend to leave a lot of my assets in the crypto ecosystem. I think there are lots of tools and fun ways to collateralize those assets. And as a student of finance, I studied derivatives and structured products in college before I dropped out to be a DJ. I've kind of always just enjoyed the intersection of these worlds, and had a fascination with fintech. So for me personally, I'm a very, very long-term believer. I'm not an active trader. I used to be in the earlier days, but when you really strongly believe in something, you're thinking 5 to 10 years down the road. And so I'm not as much actively trading anything. I'm definitely more of a long-term believer. I buy the stuff that I believe in, both from a cryptocurrency standpoint and from an NFT standpoint. I was in the original Bored Ape Yacht Club mint. I minted 33 apes. I gave a bunch away to fans. I just love gifting NFTs. I love all of the community aspects that you were highlighting. I think it's just such a powerful community, and I just can't wait to see it grow. Hopefully, Royal is a huge on ramp for the mainstream to learn about all of this stuff.
Definitely. And last question, kind of a broad, just wrapping up kind of question. What's next for music NFTs now?
Yeah, I think it's funny. Well, in this interview, we talk about music NFTs,
Hmm.
and music NFTs. If we spell it out, it's music non fungible token. That can manifest in so many different ways. It could be audio visual, it could be audio, it could be rights, it could be just patronage for an artist, for a musician, right? And so for us at Royal, we have a thesis that's pretty strong, that we think the only type of tokenized music that really matters to a fan is some form of ownership plus benefits. All the stuff that we kind of previously talked about, and that's kind of been my thesis since selling NFTs in 2020. Some of the first music NFTs, they weren't really music NFTs though. They were actually just audio visual art. So individually, I've done over 25 million in sales of audiovisual art, and now I'm excited to extend the meaning of that ownership by assigning real value. So with Royal, any token holder actually gets ownership in the song, but I've actually retroactively given all of my previous art collectors ownership in some of my music as well. And I think that's like, for me, when you ask about the future of this, I believe all NFTs that have some music component should contain real ownership and/or benefits. And I think that that's where the public will really start to see the value in these assets.
Well, is there anything else you would like to add, or anything else we didn't really touch on for this interview today?
Sunny, I have to say all of your questions were pretty perfect and sequenced in an incredible order. So we covered most things. I think just for the future, we're excited to onboard more, indie artists. Obviously, we've done a couple of big ones. We think the big artists kind of set amazing precedents and examples for all the next generation of artists. And ideally, in the quickest amount of time possible, any musician can come on Royal and mint assets, and that's the future that we're extremely excited about.
Thank you again for this interview. It was really awesome getting to talk to
Thanks,
you.
Sunny. Likewise. Hopefully, we get to do it again.